I'm happy to meet you, and I'd like you to please tell me about yourself and what you do.
Okay, well, I'm an international business transformation specialist. And the outcome of the work I do with most organizations is I'm able to increase the skills of the management and leadership team, improve morale of the organization, and increase the bottom line results in terms of money. Now,
Right.
to do that, that involves speaking, training, consulting, as well as coaching for senior leadership team.
Okay.
At this time, I'm also a professor at the York University in the Schulich School of Business.
Okay.
And as well, I own a number of properties around Canada and US that I rent out. So, like apartment buildings and cottages. So, Isaac, if you ever wanted to come to PEI, I've got a place on the ocean you can stay at.
I'll be happy to come over to PA for sure.
Yeah. And in executing what I do,
Hmm.
at this point I have probably spoken to around 3,000 audiences in around 30 countries around the world.
Wow.
Uh, I do about one or two international around the world tours every year, and I think I told you on my note that meeting up. An old friend of mine has been Brian Tracy. We've been friends for years and years. I don't know if
Okay.
you know him. And so we're meeting up in Germany next week, as a matter of fact.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So, what are some of your personal experience with marketing?
Oh my goodness, that Isaac, that has been my life. I got started very young. As a teenager, 15, my dad bought a store, like a little convenience store, and promptly had a heart attack or a stroke and was incapacitated for about a year. And I was the oldest one home, and I had to look after the store and make sure it was viable and feed the family.
Right.
And so that's when I got my start. Then, after my dad was back on his feet and he took over, I got a job with a guy. His name was Hollis Corney, but he owned a shoe store. So I started working for him, and he always complained. The customers wouldn't come in on a beautiful sunny day in PEI because they were at the beach. And then the customers wouldn't come in on a rainy, miserable day because we wanted to go outside. And after
Right.
listening to him complain for a while, I thought, we got to do something else. So I got an old pickup truck and built closets and drawers in the back. And I loaded it up with clothing and shoes and just traveled around the island selling. And it came out to be a very worthwhile commercial enterprise.
Hmm.
Then, of course, I went to work for IBM for 25 years
Right.
in the sales and marketing department. And of course, sales and marketing are very closely related, but you got to separate them. And we always took the approach, we never sold anything. And I remember I used to say that I never sold anything. What I did is I helped you make an effective and appropriate buying decision. And so that involves a little more marketing than selling. So we were more the pull, which is marketing, than the push, which is sales. And a lot of it was, of course, IBM had a big brand name,
Right.
but our sales was mostly based on the relationships, the one-on-one relationships we developed with prospects and our clients. And then, of course, now as an international speaker, you're always marketing. A lot has changed, which I know we're going to be talking about.
Right.
Uh, but just to stay viable in this business, which I've been in now for close to 30 years, you have to be marketing all the time. And as people say in this business, you're only as good as your last speech.
Right. So I guess that brings me to the next question. You worked for IBM, and in fact, you were manager of IBM, the marketing division. How has marketing changed since then?
It has changed significantly. I mean, still some of the old basic principles are still appropriate. Uh, a brand used to be a great marketing tool. I mean, when you think about brands like GE or IBM or Kleenex, or you know what I mean,
Right.
they are real brands. And now we've caught on to a trend that we got to brand ourselves. And I think what people don't realize as much as is your customers will tell you what your brand is. See, there's actually speakers out there saying, "Let me help you brand. Let me help you brand." Well, you really can't. Your brand is based on, yeah, your products and services, but it's just based on you and your behaviors and your value system and how you treat customers. And it's your customers who will tell you what your brand is. So a lot of the work being done in marketing now, they're trying to market through creating brands.
Right.
And I think that's confusing the customer a little more now. Um, of course, the other thing that's a real dilemma is the whole technology. And I haven't even caught on to that as well as I could right now.
Right.
But But I mean, a lot of marketing now, the pull is done through LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and companies really in the retail business, consumer, you really got to be focused on Yelp. And what has really changed, Isaac, is you could get away with a mistake 20 years ago, and you could make a pretty big mistake, and you could get away with it. Today, if you make a mistake within 24 hours, thousands of people know about it because it's on all the social media. So I think that is what really has changed is larger organizations especially, they really have somebody just monitoring that social media all the time. Because you could destroy a company, a brand, or a product within hours, literally within hours, if you're not looking after that. Um, and then the final thing is, and because that people are more savvy, as well as more skeptical now. So in the past, when you did marketing and you had a brand and you were a nice person,
Right.
you got it. But now people are they're more savvy, which is good, but they're more skeptical about everybody that approaches them. And the final thing is that it's a real dilemma. How do you market to the boomers versus the millennials? And it's totally different. And like my clients, because of my vintage, um, I would say more than 50% of my direct client base doesn't even use email, let alone social media and texting and all those things. And in fact, I'm working with a client, was working with a client last week. Um, he has an email account. That's a big, but he never looks at it. If I send him an email, it goes to his secretary. She prints it off, gives it to him. He writes his answer, gives it back to her, and she types it back in. That's the closest to technology he gets. And a lot of my clients are like that. But now, if your clients are the 30-year-old CEOs, my goodness, they can run circles around you in terms of technology, and they don't want to talk to you. The only way they want to communicate is with texting and all those things.
Correct.
And I think that's a real dilemma to ride that line, Isaac. Do you go this way or do you go that way? And if you do it wrong, you may not get a second chance.
Okay. So I guess this would also relate to some of the challenges in marketing. So from customers' perspective, would you be able to kind of speak more to the challenges with customers? So I mean the consumer side now.
Well, I still think this is where we get back to the basics. um, to touch a customer, a new prospect, you need to be really savvy in the social media. But to capture that prospect and to retain that prospect, it's even more about relationships now than ever. In fact, right now, and I have I keep a track of where my customers come from, and I have percentages and metrics and all that thing. And even today, it's around 85% of all my business every year is either repeat or referral, one or the other.
Okay. So
And
relationship plays a very strong strong role. Is that?
yeah, I think even more so. And I think once you get a customer, you you have to even do more because there's a lot more competitors that are biting at you, and so you have to do more. So you have to develop that relationship. Otherwise, they'll go somewhere else. And here's something that hasn't changed.
Okay.
There's a book written by Jonathan Johnson and Withers. It was called Relationship Selling, and then there was another one written called Spin Selling. And these both books are out of the 1970s, and both of them said the number one reason why you lose a client is because you lost touch with them. You didn't pay attention to them. And if you did that same research today, I think the answer would be exactly the same.
Interesting.
You have to maintain, once you got a client, you have to maintain that one-on-one touch. Now, it's different. You know, back in the 60s, the way we kept in touch is we would call them or we would send them some information. And then in the 70s and the 80s, then it was newsletter. When I was teaching sales, because I taught sales many years ago, that's how I cut my teeth in this business, was teaching sales reps. And so I remember preaching, send out newsletters, send out newsletters, send out newsletters. And that worked until newsletters became junk mail. Then I'm teaching, don't send newsletters, don't send newsletters. And because you're only aggravating your customer. Then I was teaching, get a website and send out updates and send out blogs and stuff like that. And then I got to the idea, don't do that because you're aggravating your employees. And I bet if I asked people listening right now, and including you, how many people have you unfriended on one of the social media because every day they're in your face with some piece of marketing? And so that's not the way to stay in touch anymore. And so I think so staying in touch is still the number one. It's how you stay in touch that has changed. And that's a new dilemma, I think, that comes along every few years.
Interesting. So I guess we've seen the trend since the 60s, all the way to current day today now, and you've seen how marketing has evolved. What should marketers be doing today? What would you advise? What would you recommend?
Oh man, that's a hard one. But of course, and if I absolutely knew that answer, man, I'd be I'd be smarter than you. I don't know if anybody knows that answer. It's a moving target, but I think it's a twofold strategy, and this is the best I can get my arms around it. It's a twofold strategy. Is your initial contact point marketing, you really have to be, I don't care what your product or service is, you really got to be on the internet. You really got to focus. I mean, like I use this little thing. I don't even, not only do I not carry cash anymore, because I can go into a Tim Hortons, Isaac, and just go bunk bunk, and they scan it, or I can go into a Starbucks, or I can go into the grocery store, and I pull up their app and go bunk. And so I think no matter what business you're in, you got to get the technology, be on there, have a website, and not just and websites for a lot of companies is just basically a brochure. And I'm saying, no, your website's got to be interactive, and it's got to be work with the customers and make the customer's life easy. Because I don't know how many cards you carry around. You know, like Shoppers Drug Mart has a card, Atlantic Superstar has a card, Sobeys has a card, and I can show you. I've got a booklet full of cards, and so to come up with another card, that's just a me too, and that's another card to throw. Come up with new and innovative ideas that make the customer's job decision making easier.
Okay.
I think that's the secret to the future. But then, of course, at the same time, then you still have to, once you get a client, that's the prospect stage. But once you get a client, now you got to stay in touch.
And you don't recommend sending newsletters, and so how do you actually stay in touch? What's the best way, or what would you recommend a better way to stay in touch?
Yeah, value add. Like if your client was talking, if you had a conversation with a client and in casual conversation they mentioned, well, I'm thinking about taking a vacation to the Caribbean, and then you saw an ad for half price to the Caribbean, just throw it in the mail with handwriting. Just throw it in the mail and send it off to them. And it's value add. It's something that they would like. If they're an engineering firm and you hear about an engineering project event taking place somewhere, grab the flyer, handwrite on it. Just thought you might want to know about this conference coming up, and send it off to them. I think that's the one that works the best for me anyway. Just that little, and people appreciate that little handwritten note. And here's the other thing that we've gotten away from, and even I don't do it enough. My wife, Kristen, who is also in the business, she is the master at it. And after she does an event with a client, she actually buys them a card and writes a card, and even on the envelope, hand writes their name and address, and sends the little thank you card, or a little gift, or because we spend our summers in Prince Edward Island here, and I don't know if you've ever been here, Isaac, but it's a beautiful little place. It's just like Newfoundland.
I will definitely come visit you one day.
Please do. And when you work around the world and you're in a place, well, even in the U.S., people say, Prince Edward Island, is that near Vancouver? They just don't know. So when I'm finished with working with them, I'll just send them a little note with a little flyer from PEI and say, hey, here's to know more about PEI. Here's something you might want to see. Right. So I think that's the number one thing, is make it personal. Stay in touch with, make it personal. Just to be blogging and sending them their, your I'm so wonderful flyers. So that's not going to work.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for sharing the very, very useful information.